Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hey there, and welcome back, Curious Hearts. This is episode 34 about order and hygiene and how we use order as a spiritual practice when the world around us is chaotic. Boy, does that sound so tempting and delicious. Doesn't that sound like the greatest gift we could possibly have in a world that feels, to me at least, like it is becoming increasingly chaotic, increasingly disordered, increasingly messy, where it becomes so apparent how literal natural order there is, or perhaps how many chaos agents are existing in the world. I want to start with one of my favorite introductions to this topic, which is about the Vedas. So in the yogic tradition, there are a number of different texts or canons of literature. And there are a lot of different ways of looking at the world. There are many different structures of philosophy and systematic thinking about what it means to be human, what the primary challenges are, and what the solutions to those challenges are. And as it was taught to me, and as I have begun to understand it, a lot of the early traditions, especially the Vedic practices, are very much about creating order in a disorderly world. So let me paint a picture for you. Many thousands of years ago, before electricity, before the internet, before podcasts, before we knew people other than those folks we had met in person, face to face. Imagine you are in a group of folks who travel, right? They are travelers by nature. They change their homes and where they live based on seasons and responding to nature's very real changing reality. So, in winter, they seek warm weather. And when things grow too hot, they seek cooler places. They probably move the way that monarch butterflies move, or maybe even like the geese, the wild geese that travel so many thousands of miles. They adapt to the changing environment by moving where they are in relationship to the sun and the equator, all of those things. These folks are travelers. They travel in caravans, and at every new place where they create a home, right, they set up camp and build fires and create places to live day to day. They also bring their spiritual life with them. And when they arrive in a new temporary home, they build a place for them to be in practice, to be in worship, and to connect with each other. In a modern parlance, we might even just think about this as like, where does the campfire exist? Where is the place where we all gather together to sit and break bread and sing together? And in its most basic, I am simplifying profoundly, in its most basic form, this is the purpose of the Vedas. And there are 4 books of the Vedas, and one is dedicated almost exclusively to how to build and create the spiritual place, right? What are the steps that we go through? But the very first book of the Vedas, called the Rig Veda, as it was taught to me, is a ritual. It is a routine for Vedic monks to practice and rehearse. And what they are doing is they are singing. And as they sing and chant these Vedic mantras in a specific order, in a specific way, their actions of that singing and chanting and repeated system and structure allows the sun to rise and set. It allows the rains to come. It allows fire to burn and to cook food. It allows the crops to grow. That this practice was a way of creating order in the chaos, the natural chaos of the world. And I really deeply appreciate thinking about the origin of our spiritual practice being something like that. Like when the world is scary, when there are not great ways to protect ourselves, when there maybe are not advanced machines or technologies, that actually the world is quite scary. It's chaotic, wildfires and earthquakes and hurricanes, animals that are hungry and hunting. There is a lot about the natural world that is actually quite fierce and worthy of fear. So a desire to build some kind of system that allows us to be, at the very least, in dialogue with that natural system, to be in relationship with the chaos that we might be otherwise experiencing. I really appreciate that. I kind of want some of that sometimes too, especially when the natural world behaves in ways that makes it feel almost impossible to continue to, live as a human. Unpredictability, scarcity, not being certain what will come next. I think it's easy to minimize this kind of thinking into being sort of quaint. And the ways that, modern science and modern materialistic thinking have set aside practices like astrology and magic and spiritual life as well, relegated into a corner of naivete, right? That we can't actually control the seasons. We don't actually sing to make the sun come up. That is absurd. And likewise, that the very core of any magical practice is a way for a human to influence the natural world. These are deeply tempting, attractive, helpful practices. They allow us to feel less beholden, less at the behest of the constant chaos of the waves of the world. And having that kind of system in place is incredibly soothing, I think, for us. It would be naive of us to believe that we are not doing that now, currently, in our current human culture. That we don't create systems of societies, of communities, of governments that are putting some structure, some sense of order on top of a natural world that is in some ways naturally incoherent, right? It's chaotic. That law of entropy, that all things are in time slowly dissolving, right? Everything is falling apart, right? Things fall apart. That feels like a real truth that many of us have experienced. And in the face of that kind of entropy, in the face of chaos, we want to create a system that allows us to be safe, that protects us, that keeps us from being completely victimized by the random happenings of the world. So we do things like, create insurance companies, right? We create futures markets. We have developed huge and elaborate systems of culture and behavior and what is acceptable and not acceptable, and the rules of our our organizations, right? And those organizations we often call governments, right? Collectives of humans who come together. And we all have bought into these systems. And we believe that the systems are natural in some ways, when in fact they are a very real human response to the unpredictability, the uncertainty of being alive. So we create systems of belief, and we invest our identity and our resources and our energy in proving that those systems of belief are correct. And this, of course, is where many systems of religion arise. And I have no actual opinion about the correctness of any religious system. I find tremendous value in every religion that I have ever encountered. And anytime we use that religious system as a way of eliminating and minimizing our awareness of uncertainty and chaos, I think it gets us into trouble. Because more than anything, humans, I believe, want to be in control. Because when we are in control, we are perhaps safe. And often it's an illusion of control, but that illusion is pretty tempting. It's pretty tasty, that illusion. And whether we're controlling through financial means, or controlling through military means, or controlling through information, doesn't actually matter what we use to control the world around us, or to control others, or to control ourselves. That longing to be able to direct what's happening is a desire for safety and for protection. We have created things like clock time, which is like my favorite joke ever, because we have all bought into this notion that, 1 p.m. means something, that it is authoritative and never changing. And the more you learn about the history of time and the history of clocks and clockmaking, you realize that it is an impossible exact science, that time is actually always changing, that the reality of the planets and the stars and the earth and the moon and all of the ways that we have attempted to measure our time, some of those are real, right? Sunrises, sunsets, sure. Cycles of the moon, also, those are we can experience them and predict it. But everything other than that, we have created so that we sure have a common language. We have a way of, scheduling appointments and making sure trains run on time. And this notion that time is absolute is also naive. In our everyday lives, we create so many of these systems of order and structure and control. And I think all of them are useful until they aren't. And so long as we don't use them as weapons or tools to, oppress ourselves or others, I think they're usually pretty helpful. So things like morning routines, bedtime routines, when there's traffic in the world, when there isn't traffic, when we start school, when we end school, all of those sorts of, yoga class time, right? We start class at 6 p.m. because that's, the most convenient way for us all to agree when we're going to do this thing together. It's useful. It's helpful. Even inside of a yoga asana practice, right? If you go to a yoga class, you'll start in a similar way every time, regardless of the studio that you go to or the teacher or where you're practicing. That for the most part, things follow in a reliable, predictable order. We create routines for ourselves, and we don't even necessarily realize this, right? Our brains do this on their own, which is so cool that, the neurons that they say, the neurons that fire together, wire together. So every time, the simple example is, every time the bell rings, the dog wants a treat. But also, for me now, every time I uh, grind my coffee in the morning, I turn on the hot water. I don't think about it that much, but I do the dishes while the coffee is brewing. Simple, right? It's like these things happen together. This is a simple, predictable routine. So you can see the ways that like putting those kinds of routines and rituals and practices in place bring a natural sense of order and relief into our everyday lives. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think that the trick is for us to remember that those systems and those structures that we put in place are systems and structures that we put in place. And that allows us to remember that they can change, that the structures of how we relate to each other can change, that our routines, our everyday routines can change. We can add something and take something away. And moreover, that we can use them as ways to give ourselves a sense of reliability and certainty. But if we begin to cling to those routines as a way of controlling ourselves or other people or our environment, I don't think that's taking us closer to where we would like to go. I think, in fact, that is reinforcing a sense of fear of the unknown rather than curiosity to the unknown. So those kinds of rituals and systems can, if we're not careful, create a sort of wall around our heart where we can no longer grow because we hit the limits, instead of allowing the edges to soften and for us to put some of those things in place. The other thing that I really want to talk about, and that this practice for me comes back over and over again, is about our hygiene. And I mean actual hygiene, your physical hygiene, caring for your space, caring for your body, brushing your teeth. As my dear friend Bear reminds us, you only floss the teeth that you want to keep. Those things are true. I include that in hygiene. But I also think something we rarely talk about is spiritual hygiene. And it's a really essential principle inside of this practice. And here is the core of the principle. That is everything that I've said so far when we consider how we're putting these systems into place in order to create some predictability and reliability for ourselves versus trying to control. When we are trying to control, we're putting ourselves in the position of being in charge. As my dear old beloved friend Medora Monagold said, I believe I am the general manager of the universe. I'm going to say that again. Have you ever had that experience of like, actually, I am in charge of everything here, and I need to make sure that it all goes okay. I am the general manager of the universe. And what Medora actually said is, I am not the general manager of the universe. And that is both terrifying and a total relief, because it allows us to relieve the illusion of control that actually reinforces our fear and our hypervigilance rather than rescuing us from it. And the actual lifeline, the rescue from that sense of hypervigilance, as far as I'm concerned, is building a reliable connection to the divine, to spirit, to the eternal, and recognizing that we are in relationship with that force, with that energy. We are not directing it. We cannot even begin to fathom all of the ways that that force is working on us and on the world around us. But we can be in relationship with it. And I believe the primary responsibility for us is that we are each of us vessels for that extraordinary force. We are containers Our physical bodies are containers of this little speck of divinity. But we also are a channel, each of us. Each of us can be a reminder of that divine energy, of that unfathomable force in the world for others. But in order to do that, we have to keep our channel clear. In order to be a reliable and worthwhile vessel, we have to keep the vessel clean. So, in an obvious example, when I, talk about making my coffee in the morning, I don't pour the coffee into a cup that I used 3 days ago because it probably has mold in it. Instead, I put the coffee into a clean cup so that I can experience fresh coffee without any distraction, dilution, or poison, which is what that mold would actually be to my physical body. So what does that look like? What does it look like to, put our spiritual selves in the wash, or our physical selves, through the dishwasher, so that we can be a clean and clear vessel? Aha! This is a question we can begin to answer. The first piece is that we take care of our physical vessel. That means that we wash, right? It's like very simple, but it means that our daily routines of human living, right? Our showers and our teeth brushing and our face washing and our skincare and, putting on clean clothes and changing our underwear and flossing the teeth that we want to keep. All of those are actions that allow us to be cleaner and clearer to receive the energy that is here for us. The other thing that I know to be true is that we care about the things, we develop a sense of love for the things that we are taking care of. Often not the other way around. Sometimes we love something so much that we want to take care of it, and it really does feel like that is the order of things. But for the most part, I wasn't particularly attached to my plants until I had to start watering them all the time, making sure they're okay. How are they feeling? Okay, great. The same thing is true of our physical form and our mind and our body and our hearts. Like, if we're having a hard time loving our body as it is, if we're having a hard time, feeling a sense of affection and adoration for our expansive, curious hearts, just as they are, instead of trying to force that feeling, the most effective and direct route into that feeling is to just take care of those things. So that means now building a routine and a practice of going to the doctor, going to the dentist, getting regular checkups, maybe getting a massage on occasion if that's inside of your financial realm. Caring for our physical body by moving it, by building our strength and our flexibility, and not dismissing our body as this unfortunate thing that we have to carry around. Instead, we treat it as the temple, right? We begin to care for ourselves and our physical form, at the very least, as if our body and our physical form were something worth caring for. We get enough sleep, we drink water, we don't eat a whole lot of garbage. We do our best not to poison it too often with, mind-altering things. Not because there's something inherently wrong with anything other than that. Not that there's anything wrong with staying up too late, or that there's some reason of punishing ourselves for being dehydrated. That instead it's like, okay, if I would like to be open and receptive to this unfathomable force that is here and available for me all the time, I would just like to make some space to clear the decks. I'd like to put away the clutter and wipe down the counter so there is a clear and clean space, so that when that force is available, I'm less distracted and more ready for it. So beyond caring for our physical form, we also care for the other parts of us. When we care for our mind, sure, that might be something like talk therapy or journaling or learning about ourselves. We've talked about self-study and self-examination. I believe that is one of the ways that we care for our mind. We also actively seek out things that challenge us, that make us think harder, because our mind, well, it's not a muscle like your muscles are a muscle, right? But it it thrives on being used and challenged and moved. We read challenging books. We engage in conversations that make us think harder. We are not afraid to engage in relationship with people who disagree with us just because they make us question what we had thought until now. All of those are ways that we care for our mind. We care for our heart by engaging in creative practices. We've talked about creativity as one of these, and this is both a heart practice and a spirit practice. We begin to familiarize ourselves and experience the breadth and depth of our emotional life, not as a way of worshiping our emotions, but as a way of being in awe of what wide breadth of experience is available, that it's not just happy, sad, mad, tired, that there is an entire tapestry of feeling experience and a way of relating to the world that allows us to hold our hearts in this tender and precious way. It begins to give us a sense of awe and profound respect for what is possible in there. I love practices like singing and music and art, whether we are creating or experiencing that. Being in relationship with other people is then a way that we do this. It's a way that we tend to our hearts. We allow ourselves to be in extraordinary, ecstatic relationship. We let ourselves fall in love. We let ourselves have crushes on people. Whether we act on those things or not is something else entirely, but we don't dismiss or minimize the feeling, because again, then we are caging our hearts. We're trying to control them. And instead, we begin to learn to live with how expansive and broad they are. I left the best for last, and also maybe the hardest to talk about, which is like, how do we care for our spirit? What does that even mean? And this is the core of all spiritual practice, that our spiritual practices are how we practice spiritual hygiene. That means that we are able to sit in meditation and in prayer, if that resonates, as a way of affirming and connecting to that part of us that is a speck of the unfathomable force. To recognize the ways that we are connected, not intellectually, but on a subtle and otherworldly way, in a way that we actually cannot understand with our thinking mind. So we can't read about that stuff. We can't think about that stuff. We can talk about it, and all of that is like fun and pleasurable and enjoyable. But it means that we have to, like, you can't, reading about a shower does not get you clean. And I often, when I'm, resisting meditation, I just think about it like, okay, we're going to go take our spiritual shower now. We're just going to go sit and like rinse off all of the gunk that has stuck to me that I don't understand. I don't know how all that works. I don't need to know how it works in order to just sit and be present and allow it to be rinsed, right? To be cleared, and maybe to clear it with breath, to clear it with mantra, to invite the energy of that unfathomable force to come help us just reset and reorient. There are other practices of spiritual hygiene that I think can be really useful, especially if we are operating in this world all the time. Things like building spiritual boundaries and learning how to clear and reset spaces, learning how to ask unwelcome energies to go somewhere else. Like all of those things are inside of this world. But that's sort of, I think that even thinking about that for some people can be off-putting. And so if you're interested or curious about that sort of stuff, send me a message. I'd be happy to talk more about it with you. But for the broad world here, it's just like, what do I need to be a clean and clear vessel? If I would like to be a channel for, as goofy as it sounds, if I would like to be a channel for divine love in the world, what do I need to do to clear the channel? And it might be something simple in this moment, or you might realize that you need something a little bit more dramatic, right? You might need to take some time away, right? You might need to go on retreat. But that this is work that if we can rely on those practices of creating systems of order and structure and creating our own habits and routines of hygiene, of caring for ourselves, what happens is that it's not that we are controlling the outside world. It's that our inner world is more prepared for whatever the outside world might bring. And it's a nuanced shift. And on the outside, it might not look any different, right? The difference between getting up and going for a run and brushing your teeth and, putting on really well-pressed clothing could just as easily be a way of controlling everything as it is a way of creating space. And just like any other direct experience practice, only you will know the difference. But it's time to learn the difference between the two. I want to thank you so much for going with me on this little conversation. And if you are curious or interested in creating some structure like this, some habit or some routine about how you put in place just enough order that you feel a sense of ease and receptivity and preparedness, right? That you feel spiritually prepared for the chaos that the world is bringing, I would love to support you. That is one of the things that I love helping people with the most. It is one of the things that I come back to myself the most. And that this sense of putting things in order as a way of honoring our place in this divine relationship is nuanced and just as unique as each individual person. So whether that means, a Muslim call to prayer that has a very specific way of cleansing the body beforehand and a very physical way of being in the body and very specific described prayers that are repeated at specific moments throughout the course of the day, 5 times a day, every day in the same direction. All of that order is like thrilling to me in many ways. In the same way that I'm recording this episode in the week that is leading up to Easter. And so the practice of the Stations of the Cross as a way of re-rehearsing and going through this ritual of practice, of reminder, and being present and anchoring ourselves back in. Maybe it looks something as simple as waking up in the morning and taking a full, complete inhale, feeling the expanse of your breath and the majesty of this natural body that is able to breathe and send blood and move and think and sleep and wake up. And then exhaling anything that is unnecessary. The form of the order, the form of the ritual, the form of the routine doesn't matter, in my opinion. What matters is that you find those systems of order and routine and care that prepare you and support you for the world as it is now. My prayer, as always, is that your curious heart stays open, that we stay present to the vast expanse of that unnameable, unknowable force, and that we are unafraid to face whatever unpredictability comes towards us, because we have been brave enough to create our own rhythms of order and hygiene. Take really excellent care of yourselves, curious hearts, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in, curious hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.